this is going to be Chip's signal. I'm going to just wave the white flag there so he knows when to edit.
Hello, everybody. I am Chip Walton, and welcome to Chop and Brew for what is the grand finale of our 6-part Better Judge a Mead series. A series of interviews hosted by National Mead Maker of the Year, Josh Holbrook, as he talks to some of the most influential thinkers and drinkers in the mead making and mead judging world. And we're going out with some fireworks. A lot of rounds of fireworks, as any grand finale should have. We have Josh chatting with the one and only, the outspoken and fast-talking Dr. Kristen England. Y'all know Kris. He's been on the show a bunch. He's a homebrewer turned pro brewer and distiller, high-level beer and mead judge, and also the education director for the BJCP. He has organized many homebrew and mead competitions in his time, and when it comes to talking about judging and comps, dude is extremely blunt and no holds barred. In this hour-plus conversation, Kris talks with Josh about many topics, including some misunderstood parts of judging, entry description versus quality of mead, common flaws in mead, judging as a two-way street between a judge and an entrant, contradictory score sheets, entering competitions for feedback versus entering to win, and a whole lot more. At the end, they taste a mead that often gets dismissed by many mead geeks, Chaucer's mead. This is kind of the BMC of meads, if it were, and they give their thoughts on it. Couple of things before we get rolling into this interview. BJCP folks, you can actually earn non-judging points for watching, participating with, and interacting, giving your thoughts on these discussions. So check the video description below for a link for this specific video, and the previous 5 videos all have unique links for you to do that and to get those non-judging points. And lastly, I just want to give a huge thank you and shout out to Josh Holbrook. I mean, I think this series totally shows his passion and obsession with mead. Truth be told, like, this was 0% my idea. He had basically already done 80% of the interviews and really didn't have anywhere for them to live necessarily. Just knew that this was a great resource for people to learn more about mead judging, get kind of an inside look and perspective from the people that he talked with. We hope it will be a resource for years to come. We hope that it's made some wiser, maybe more comfortable mead judges. We hope that it's inspired some mead comp organizers to kind of think about some structure. And more than anything, we just hope maybe we made a couple of mead makers, or at least mead appreciators. That, after all, is kind of the point. So big shout out to Josh. Thanks for bringing the concept of Chop and Brew. Thanks for approaching each conversation with like your deep knowledge and curiosity, and moderating some awesome discussions. I already put some of the tips and advice, suggestions that we've heard from all 6 of our guests to work this week when I judged a mead flight for Valkyrie's Horn. I wrote some of these things down literally on a post-it note, put it on the computer so that I would think a little bit more mindfully about what was going on as I was judging. And lastly, we got to give a big high five to our friends over at Imperial Yeast. They've been ride or die with Chop and Brew for a few years now, and they were very excited to hear about and support the B-Jam series. So show them some love, show their yeast some love the next time you brew. ImperialYeast.com. And all my honeybees keeping it sweet by way of Patreon. Help them keep the show buzzing along at patreon.com/chopandbrew.
All right, thanks for being here tonight, Kris. And I want to say, I don't know if it's condolences or congratulations on, it sounds like it's your return to education director with BJCP.
Yes, it is both, and also true.
Oh, nice. So we'll just dive into it. So just a very broad question to start. What aspect of mead judging do you see as the most misunderstood?
As in the samples, or as in like when we sit down to judge?
I think when we sit down to judge, like when you're talking to other judges and you're seeing judging happening, like what's something that you think is really misunderstood that you want to clarify or see change?
I think the concept of pallet fatigue and how the pallet gets fatigued is one. It really pisses me off when we sit down to judge and there's a whole list of meads, for whatever category. And usually the organizer has, we're just going to assume they have them set in a certain way, right? It may not be the perfect way, but it's a way, and let's go. It really pisses me off when you have a higher ranking judge sit down and decide to either one, cherry pick what ones they want to try themselves and have their little minions scurry along to get them, or two, try to reorder the pull sheet for 50 or 60 meads. It just annoys the ever-living piss out of me, because we're all trying to sit here and do it. Because if you're pulling all these, the vast majority of time, you don't have a set number of meads. You just take them as they come. You're like, okay, just pull 3 for us and we'll go. Write down the pull sheet. I would assume that they're in some order. My guess is lightest to sweetest, which is fine. Carbonation, great. If anything spicy or something like that, I would assume that somebody has that towards the end. But even with you judge long enough that even with things that what is written on the bottle does not necessarily make it into the glass, right? You can say, okay, well, you have 3 hot pepper meads. We have let's say a scorpion pepper mead, and we have a jalapeno mead. You say, okay, we're going to do the jalapeno first, and the jalapeno blows your doors off, and the scorpion doesn't taste like anything, right? I mean, there's so much being put into these freaking pull sheets, or high-ranking judges deciding that they know better. It's just crazy, because most of these mead competitions, especially mead-specific competitions, everyone's aware that palate fatigue can be a thing, and you don't want to have the big sweet boomers, before the little tiny hydromelts. That's a fact. Other than that, it's kind of a crapshoot about what's in the glass and not. And spending 35 to 40 minutes just letting somebody that knows better do it is just really freaking annoying. And to me, it says how much more I know than you, one, and two, how little I care about your time, right? And that's just as a judge. And all of these comments are just as a judge, unless you ask me something specific to the BJCP that I am involved in. To be clear, from here on out. I mean, I think that's one of the big ones. People really focusing on the pull sheet before things are even done, and not just what order they're pulled in, but reading the pull sheet and having a bias automatically. Oh, well, I don't know if that combination is going to work, or oh, I don't know about these blueberries, or oh, boysenberries and this honey. Just judge the damn mead and shut up with the whole, I don't know what this is going to be like, because, I mean, how many times have you sat down and going, wow, that sounds like a really great combination? I mean, just not biased, just that sounds funny. You tried it and like, wow, this is horrible. And at the same time, you're thinking, wow, I don't know how this will ever work, but okay, let's try it. And you try it and it's really good. There's so much time put into, what this is versus what that is. As people start judging more and more, they'll get into more of an automated, it's like, what is this? What's in it? Okay, let's go. And then you try it, and then you talk about it. It's I think a lot, way too much is put on what's written on the bottle, and that's besides the long diatribes that some ass clowns like to put on the bottle to talk directly to me as a judge, right? Running a large competition, running numerous competitions, I can tell you right now, I never ever give the entrant full access to the judges. You just don't. You don't get 250 characters to explain your concept of this mead to the judge. It's the judge's job. I don't care where you picked your cherries from, and I don't care if it's a blend of 5 different honeys. You just write the honeys down, write the fruit down, and let's go. I mean, trying to bias the judges, even though people say they're not trying to, it's bullshit. It's absolutely trying to bias the judges. Because when you sit down, let's say you have a good mead that's 50% wildflower, 50% Mexican orange blossom, 50% Tupelo, or sorry, however many percent Tupelo that makes 100. Let's say 1. And then you've got Michigan raspberries, and you've got homegrown rhubarb, and all these key words, and you judge it, and it wins. In the next competition, somebody starts judging, and they get that same thing. They're like, that's Sharon's mead, man, that was a fantastic mead, and boom, you have bias. All of a sudden, that goes directly to the mini boss, and the mini boss to maybe the boss. And if we can remove much of that as an organizer specifically, because when you sit down to judge, you don't have that option. But as organizers, if we can pull all that crap out and just get it down to what is this actual mead? Okay, orange blossom, Tupelo, cherry, fantastic. I mean, some meads will be polarizing, and you'll be able to see who they are. You'll be able to see who they are, not know exactly, but but you can't get past that. You can't get around some unique character. But what you can get around is ensuring that those words are not used. and not allowing people the chance to be able to have a full description. If people don't know what something is, they can ask, and that's what the organizers are there for. That's what head mead people are there for. And even if the organizer doesn't know, there's plenty of people sitting around that you can say, hey, does anybody know what this is? Because it happens all the time. And that's one of the coolest parts. Like, oh yeah, this is this thing. Not commentary on I like or dislike this thing. It just is a thing. And I find that to be, I mean, I've learned most of the things I've learned in beer or booze or something by just having those little single serving friend conversations about something that just I didn't know that. And it's like, wow, that's fantastic. And now maybe I can apply that to the future. And when I judge, I always try to be helpful when asked. Not the judge that sits, 99% across the room, and every time there's a question, they want to get up and have a conversation about it. Just more along the lines of like, hey, and organizers know the ones that they should be asking. They're like, hey, do you know anything about this? I'm like, yes. And sometimes they'll know too much about it. I'm like, if they know whose it is, or they think they know who it is, they can say, I'd rather not answer really directly about that, but I can tell you, let's say sumac is an absolute terrible idea for a group of individuals to get together and dump into a mead, because you get delicious lemonade. And by delicious, I mean not delicious lemonade. You just get lemonade. But it's fine because sumac is easy to find and it's delicious. You made one of those, didn't you, Josh?
No,
you're involved in the sumac thing.
I missed out on the sumac challenge.
Oh, dude! It was delicious. They tell me.
Oh, I made sumac tea. I just drank it straight.
Was it the poison sumac tea?
We'll find out later. You mentioned sanitizing entry descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely.
When does this go too far? I had talked to someone who had one example was a mead that was aged on a varietal wine grape pumice, and the entry got sanitized to grapes. So, I mean, there's obviously
that's too much.
Yeah, there's a process here that has an effect.
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't be dicking around with anybody's entry stuff unless you know exactly what you're doing, right? Because the last thing you want to do is the quality of the entry means nothing. The last thing you want to do is take the ability of that thing out, right? To do well in. I mean, when I'm sanitizing these things, I will email people and say, hey, you have your thing in the wrong category. Beer, mead, cider. Would you like to move it? And they'll say, I would say 95% of the time, no, this is the right category. And I'm like, cool, we'll leave it there. And in the score sheet, you damn well know it's written. It's like you should enter it in this category. And I'm like, I really want people to learn where things should go. And if they don't, there's nothing wrong with trying to help them out. I mean, of course, it's only the categories that I wouldn't be judging in as an organizer. But other than that, it's the sanitizing has to be common sense, right? You're not just going to say give a general, some berries. I mean, if somebody's like there's boysenberries and raspberries, and gooseberries in this, with aged on Sangiovese grape pumice, there's nothing like off-putting about that I can think of for as a judge. Like that's fine. None of those words were negative. You're not trying to do anything. You're just describing, right? If you said, Sangiovese grapes growing on this hill in Italy that I got from somebody, this, that, the other, sure, right? We don't need that puffery. But just listing the ingredients, there's absolutely no issue, right? And I mean, even more onto your thing about ingredients. I mean, there's numerous high-ranking judges, absolute ass clown judges, that will sit there and tell you that one, you should be able to taste absolutely everything that's listed, which is bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Because like mulling spices are mulling spices. It's the concept, right, of mulling spices. People understand. You don't have to pick each individual one. Let's say you have a mead and you listed 4 or 5 fruits. Great, 4 or 5 fruits, and what ratios? It doesn't matter. Even worse are the ones that say you should be tasting these at the level in the order they're written. So let's say I said cherries, raspberries, and blueberries. Cherry should be higher, raspberry should second, blueberry should be third. That's even more bullshit. I mean, I don't know where I absolutely have no idea where this stuff comes from. Absolutely, I know numerous high-ranking judges that spill this drivel. I've stopped the mash out competition and flat out said, no, this is not a thing. This is not a thing. None of this stuff is just information for the judges, because frankly, if we're all being honest, it doesn't mean anything at all. If I just put 10 bottles out in front of you, and let's just say we allowed people to say the size of the mead and the sweetness, that's it. Carbonation, I don't care. Let's just say, and I'm only saying to give everything an equal shot. Let's say the hydromels, the little tiny hydromels that are dry, and the big fat polishy things on the other end. That's all you had to put. You don't get to put ingredients. You don't have to put anything. And we judge them. Josh, let's say you and I judge them. Let's say we did 10 of them. We could do a pretty damn good job of picking out the best one. I mean, when you break it down to individual style, it gets a little more difficult because you have to have a little more nuance. But when it comes to the best thing, it's not required. We're picking the best thing on the table, the end. When we need to compare them to style, then we have to get a little more fancy when we talk about, what we require and not require. But just to taste the thing, just to write my description of it, I need to know nothing. I'm writing this thing, and then when I write it down, I can compare it back to say they said there were strawberries in here. I don't care if they said there were. Let's say it's a hydromel and a little teeny dry hydromel, and you look like cherries and you don't taste any cherries at all. Does that mean cherries aren't in there? No, it absolutely doesn't at all. Let's say I taste this big barrel aged thing. It tastes like almost cherry pipe tobacco. Oh, guess what? Let's say there's no cherries in that at all. Actually, no cherries in that at all, but it tastes like cherries. The point of writing these things down are, one, to get them into category, but two, to give us a reference about what we're supposed to be tasting and how to think. But when we judge specifically, we don't care. All we want to do is write this great description. I just want to write a great description, what I taste in my glass, the little keywords that they give you about the berries or about the honey, about that's different. That's just bonus. That gives you something else to add to your description. It's really, really utterly important to understand that. Just judge the damn mead and stop taking all these points mentally away before you even get to it. I mean, I have numerous conversations with Judge. I mean, a bunch of us were talking earlier today about if you have this philosophy that you have to taste everything, 1 and 2, they're in the order they're written, and then 3, how they all interact together specifically, and do they fit this thing? This mead's already got a 25, 26 before you even get to taste it. And then it hits 27, 28, and okay, thanks for entering, and away you go. And the mead that was absolutely fantastic, it's absolutely crapped on because somebody's self-imposed rules about points. And the same thing for carbonation and sweetness levels, and dryness levels, right? I mean, other than traditional stuff, when I'm giving you, I'm telling you things. Let's say you had a melomel that you said was dry, turns out to be semi-sweet. I don't care. When I'm judging it, I was like, that's what it is. You will care when those things are written dry or semi-sweet, and you open them up and they're dry because this thing is foaming everywhere, right? I mean, that's a completely different issue. But when it comes to taking away points because something was listed dry and it's supposed to be semi-sweet, not traditionals now. We're talking pretty much any other meads or something. You say sweet and somebody argues, well, this is semi-sweet, right? I mean, you have like this 5% sweet and this 5% dry and this like 90% of gray area. That's kind of somewhere semi-sweet in between, because we're not ranking these things based on how correct they are for how much sugar is left over. Carbonation is the same way. It's like, is this sparkling? Is this petulant? Ooh, it tastes a little flat to me. I don't get it. You have all these things that are being judged without any point values. I mean, actually any point values. I mean, you have mouthfeel and you have appearance and everything like that. And all of that is very important and all wrapped into the judging. But if it's carbonated or not carbonated, that doesn't make the mouthfeel worse or better, right? Let's say this thing that was supposed to be petulant is still, and it tastes absolutely delicious, right? Full points. You're gonna take points away because they said petulant? Right? I mean, it boggles my mind why a judge would argue that something that doesn't give points gives points just because it says mouthfeel. It's not mouthfeel based on they said it was petulant. It's mouthfeel for the individual thing you're drinking. How is the mouthfeel? Is it thin? Oh no, it's not thin at all. How is it? Well, it's not tannic. It's not acid. It's super smooth. It's supple. It's elegant. Oh, 2 points off because it's not petulant. It's not a thing. It's not a thing at all. I don't know who pushed that. I know numerous people who try to push that. I know numerous high-ranking judges that when they watch this, they're going to be absolutely pissed off because I said, oh, yeah, you know who you are, but why call people out? What you need to do is when you hear this, say, hey, person, stop it. What are you doing? You're not helping new judges. You're not helping old judges, and you're doing everybody that enters a discredit. I mean, we all want to learn. We all want to get better. We all want to do better. And for somebody to start taking points off because they have a mental spreadsheet that checks boxes off is just, I don't even understand how somebody can even do that, frankly. I mean, it's like I'm taking it upon myself to tell you this is not good enough because your understanding of petulant versus my understanding of petulant is different than spumante. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I agree. People are getting way too hung up on the sweetness, carbonation, and strength parameters, especially when it comes to making it a qualifying type offense.
Right.
Oh, they were off.
Yeah.
We're going to set this one aside, or 20 out of 50, or whatever
Right.
appropriate punishment they think they want to dole out.
I mean, I truly see it way more often in higher ranking judges or judges that are either professional or have been doing it a long time. I see it way more often there. And to me, it's one of those fake it till you make it. You're having all this conversation about absolutely nothing without focusing on, not understanding, again, Christmas berry honey, or not understanding, the depth of a Polish mead, or not understanding, the acid tannin sweet balance. You're dancing all around these things that you should know, but you're not talking about them. You're only talking about the entry, the entry things, which when you sit down next to judges like that, and that's all they talk about. It was you'll hear them say, it was kind of sweet. It wasn't really as sparkly as it's supposed to be. And, I didn't really get raspberry. We're like, what the hell is that? How is that having a conversation about this mead? And you're like, okay, well, this is really delicious. And you'll see a lot of the time, you're like, I gave it a 45, and somebody will be like, well, I gave it more like a 32. And you're like, yeah, you're wrong. Come up, because this thing's delicious. Right. And it's, that's the whole thing. And the points too, I don't understand. I think people think you can cash these in when you die, when they're so freaking butt puckering tight with them. I don't understand. There has to be a breadth. I mean, everybody can't judge everything at 28 to a 34 at all. You'll see some people like, well, and again, a lot of these people are the same ones that have their own mental checklist about what they require in a mead and what they don't require in a mead. I mean, there are very few really, really bad meads that I've had. I mean, there have been some absolutely horrendous ones, and some of their bad ideas, and some that were flat, or some that were infected, sure. But I mean, in general, if it's fermented, at a moderate temperature and they use enough yeast, I mean, you may say, okay, well, they could have used a better honey, sure, and the lack of complexity, sure. But I mean, you're still talking mid-30s for something that's absolutely nothing wrong with this mead, other than it lacks some inspiration and lacks maybe some freshness. I mean, it's being able to understand that and then go beyond that. The delicious being great is the enemy of good in this instance and most other instances. So I just wish people would. I mean, I beg and I plead for people to use things a much broader range. And there are people that have like a badge of honor. They're like, well, this was I judged a 45 last week, and this is not a 45. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Was this last week? Before or after you ate 6 pounds of barbecue at night and smoked 2 cigars? And then you got up to judge the next morning, right? I mean, come on, guy. Let's all just, go ahead.
It sounds like you suspect some of the hyper focus on parameters and scores and some of those other things that really aren't discussing the mead real in depth or
right at all. Like, you can look like a freaking expert by just discussing the tits off that thing that's absolutely meaningless. You can talk for 15-20 minutes about each mead without ever actually talking about the mead. It's crazy. For anybody that watches this, give it a shot. Just sit there and listen and watch some of these people that talk nothing about the mead at all. 10-15 minutes, just blather on. I'm like, well, you did not address anything in this mead at all.
Whereas when you're talking about the meat of it, you're going to talk about balance, structure, and really what the ingredients are like, and knowing what those.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I talk about are the entry parameters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially on mini boss, and then again, especially on boss. But you're just doing standard judging. Yeah. First thing I'm going to talk about is like, let's talk about the quality. Let's talk about fermentation first. Regardless, let's just when I sit down, I just talk about the fermentation character. How is it? Are there any fermentation issues? No. How about balance issues of any sort? Any elbows at all? No. Now let's talk about the quality of the honey. One of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody says, you need more orange blossom character, and the answer, or choose whichever honey. It's like, no, you need better orange blossom character, right? People have a really difficult time when they spend a lot of money on something that it's not tip top, that they believe it should be for the money they spent. And they'll tell you, well, I got this from so-and-so. And you're like, there are some absolutely ridiculously fantastic places where you can get honey. And rarely in all of them do you find every single honey they have is absolutely phenomenal. right? And they'll even say that. You're like, what you talk to like, what's your? It's like, all of our stuff is good, but our best stuff is let's try this, this bush honey or whatever it is. And our orange blossom or Mexican orange blossom is ridiculously good, Or our Tupelo is okay. It hasn't been great this year. Those are the ones that you love and you trust. Or our wildflower. It's got this crazy cinnamon note to it. It's super, super kind of herbal and florally. You should try that, right? I mean, so if you have the beekeepers and the people selling the honey telling you this, right? But you decided because you wanted to save on shipping, you also got whatever else they had and you used it. And the comment came back is like, it really needs a better, richer, deeper, brighter, honey character, or it needs better or more fermentation character from the honey, or you fermented all of the character out of the honey, which I see an awful lot when people just pitch. I mean, that's just a production thing, but pitching so much yeast or putting so many nutrients in, there's so many things, there's so many ways to take delicious honey and screw it up. But also the one I see most often is that you didn't screw up anything. You just didn't have great ingredients. Right? Usually the way it goes is that if an ingredient is really, really easy to find in your area, depending on your area, but really easy to find in your area and everybody can find it, it's usually not the highest of quality. And I don't mean you have to go in the middle of nowhere to find it, something that's fantastic, but if you find these little mom and pop stands on the roadside that have these fresh picked raspberries, they're usually going to be pretty much legit. You get the clamshells in the grocery store, not so much. I mean, they're going to taste like raspberry, but still. You get a mango in a regular grocery store that just looks like a mango. You go to the Asian store where they turn over so many different, or they have 3 or 4 different types of mangoes, and they have all different levels of ripeness because different dishes require things to be, different ripeness, right? So it's not just a simple plug and play thing, making absolutely fantastic mead, let alone just making really good mead. Sourcing, especially when you add things other than just honey and water. Sourcing really, really, really becomes an issue. I mean, cider even more so, right? I grow my own. Let's say you grow your own cider. Your cider, you have 2 cider trees, and you're like, that's great. And these other people are like, oh yeah, I have a whole orchard and I have a whole different types. And when you taste their cider, you're like, yeah, you do. This is crazy, right? It's so cool to be able to taste things like that, where somebody's got, like, I have these 3 or 4 honeys that I brought from somewhere, all different places. Try them, like, wow, these are all really cool and unique, right? So people need to focus more on a brighter or better character rather than a more character, because that's what you see in beer judging all the time. It's like, oh, you need more hops. You don't need more hops, man. You need better hops, right?
Well, with the honey character example, how distinguishable does it need to be if you have a mead that has 4 different berries and 4 different spices? And
again, it doesn't. It just has to be a blend, right? I mean, there's numerous times that I see judges just run their damn mouth about, I don't know why you use Tupelo on this. I can hardly get Tupelo, and Tupelo is expensive. Like, what are you doing, man? It's their damn money. Let them spend whatever. What does you having an input on their spending have to do with anything? Right? Tupelo. It's like, oh, I only use Tupelo on the best. Buy it or don't buy it. There's many, many more expensive honey than Tupelo. I don't know what the hell a judge has anything to say about the cost of the honey and the blend they have it together, other than if it's delicious and it works or it doesn't. And when you get all the way down to little tiny hydromels and stuff like that, personally, I really want, when I make little dry hydromels, I really want to take a honey that has enough character that when it ferments out, you'll still have some of that character. Also, choosing a yeast that will exemplify that character and maybe even brighten it up a little bit, right? But that's on the production side again. You don't have to get nearly any sort of honey varietal character out of little tiny dry hydromel traditionals. The best ones absolutely will. I mean, that's just a fact. You use absolutely high end. Like, let's say you use the best orange blossom, Mexican orange blossom. I mean, in my opinion, is some of the absolute best orange blossom you get. You use a fantastic yeast, that will absolutely support that. You don't overpitch it. You treat it right. You get your acid balance right. You get your tannin balance right. And to me, the little dry ones, I really like them carbonated because it's almost like a little tiny, not cider, but even like a little Vino Verde type. And then you still get some of that character coming through. That's not to say you can't have a fantastic varietal honey that doesn't have a ton of the character, right? I think people get focused on it like, well, I really don't. This character is really not screaming through, and they're missing the entire part about how elegant the meat is and how supple it is and how delicious it is, right? Especially if it's still, right? I mean, again, still, still's hard on a little tiny thing because you don't have those delicious bubbles helping you with the aroma and the flavor and brightening your palate stuff, right? I mean, that's just, to me, that's a personal thing. I'm not a dry, or I'm not a still dry hydromel guy. Just I'm not. I understand them. I mean, I just think that if you took that same thing and added bubbles to it, it's better. But you may not. Josh, let's say you made one and you're like, I don't like the bubbles in it. Bubbles are stupid. That's great for you. And you enter in a competition and somebody say, hey, you should probably put bubbles in this. And it's like, I've been over this with Kristen. I don't want bubbles in it. And I would say to you, dude, that's fine. It's just, no, that's gonna affect, how it presents to most people.
Yeah. So is that bias?
No, yes and no. It can be. It can. You're absolutely right. My personal feeling is I think they do way better with carbonation. Absolutely. I prefer them better with carbonation. I make them better with carbonation. In all fact, they do better with carbonation because they're a lot more effervescent and you can smell a lot more off them. That's just the same difference. If I pour flat beer, if I pour fizzy beer, right? And I'm saying beer because we're still talking 5% things, 6%. Now when we get up into get up to, let's say 12, 13, 14, 15, 16% of anything, choose beer or mead or wine, there's a hell of a lot more going on into that glass than there was at the 5%, right? There's so many more ingredients, basically. There's so many more flavor bits. There's so many more aroma bits in that thing that it 1,000%, and it's usually thicker. It's 1,000% will give off that much more aroma. So when you don't have very much at all to go into the thing to make it anyways, right? I mean, you make a 6%, 5% hydromel, there's very little honey that you put into that thing versus the big ones. So then you're just talking just the concept of adding more flavor and more aroma. The little ones, you got to do as much as you can to get all that flavor and aroma out because you put so damn little in.
But if you're,
and go ahead.
If you're judging a dry still hydromel, but say you think they do better with carbonation, that's something you're never going to write on a score sheet, right? Like that's not a
yeah, sure you can. You if you have enough experience, you've had them. You're like, let's say again, let's use the Mexican orange blossom as another example, right? Or let's use a few of the honeys, the Angico from Brazil, or let's say you got something cool, something cool from Chile or from New Zealand, and you'll say. You can say, listen, give this a try. It's not taking points away. You can say, give this a try, carbonated, and see if you like the aroma better. Because usually it's mostly an aroma thing when it comes to having the carbonation, right? It's like for those little guys, you don't smell a whole lot, but you can still taste. You can still taste usually more than you can smell. And it's not. I'm not knocking you to say that you're getting less points for this. I'm just saying I think this would probably do better if it had some fizz to it. Give it a shot. Right, all the while not knocking it because it didn't. But if it doesn't have any aroma, it just doesn't have any aroma. And the easiest way to give something more aroma is just make it fizzy, especially the little ones. That way, you can smell a lot more. I mean, it's just the way it goes. Yeah. But that's not me knocking the style, and that's not me taking points off just because it's still. That's me saying, hey, give it a shot. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard not to come off as knocking it with a comment like that, though, because like if it sounds like you're telling him to carbonate it, I mean, you might as well be telling him to add fruit to it or other ingredients that you're telling them to make a different mead, right?
Yeah, sure. I don't disagree with you, but there's a point where your opinion it gets to a point where I would prefer as a person versus I think as a judge, saying as Kristen, I prefer that they're sparkling. As a judge, I almost always say, give this a go sparkling, and see what you think. Because a lot of the time, most of the time, they don't have the capacity to make things sparkling. That I've found.
Sure.
It's not that they chose like I really like flat, over fizzy. It's just they don't have the capacity. And I always put my email in there, so it's like, hey, let me know how it goes. Like for things like that, I usually write, let me know how it goes, or tell me what you think. Or if you want to talk more, or, I mean, to me, that's what a judge should do anyways, especially, I'll even ask questions sometimes on like at the bottom, instead of just like, because it can be a two-way street, especially if I have, and they can be rhetorical questions too. It's like, have you thought about blending this honey with something else? Do you know your source? Is this honey because let's say you'll get an orange blossom that tastes kind of tallowy, so poor processing usually, right? Where they get a lot more, they heat it up too much to get some wax in the honey and such. And you say, are you trusting this honey source? Because to me, it tastes quite tallowy, right? You get that waxy character to it. Anytime you get waxy character in there, one, it's been heated to be processed usually, or it got really hot before they harvested, or however, the honey or the wax ended up in there. Have you thought about, getting honey from somewhere else? Or I'll even give suggestions like, hey, try this place for the honey. The honey's they're if you haven't thought about it, the honey's fantastic, right? Or the yeast, try this yeast. I think it would do really well here, right? Because there's sometimes some people will use yeast that just absolutely, especially in varietal honeys, they like using yeast that doesn't really kick off a whole lot of esters, and they keep the varietal character. Which, I mean, I've met very few yeasts that kick esters that cover that varietal character. You're just kind of adding cake on cake to me. That's more of a production thing, but it's along the lines of like, because even in the small things, you're looking for depth, complexity, suppleness, right? I mean, it's not just honey water.
Aside from that, I do want to make you put on your BJCP hat for a moment, because word on the street,
Yeah, sure.
There's going to be updated style guideline for Polish. Are you able to speak about that?
Yeah, sure. To a point.
All right. Well, what's the hot scoop? Is it going to be a more specific guideline coming out?
Oh no, I wrote one specifically for Polish.
Oh, okay. So
I mean, the biggest issue we have in Polish to me is cheaters and liars, more or less, right? I would say you have a good 70, 75, 80% of people doing them, trying to do them more or less the Polish way, right? And the Polish is kind of the old schooly way of doing things. A few of the dudes from Poland that make fantastic Polish meads, they're out there and they will answer any question you have, and are absolutely lovely people and will do everything they can, right? And then you have people that are blending all crap together, entering them competitions, lying about it, and then coming off like being not Polish experts, but coming off like, oh yeah, and someone's like, oh yeah, I got that done in X amount of time. I mean, the biggest thing Polish wise to me is the aging. You can't fake the aging. You can't speed up the aging. If you want the traditional ones with depth, you have to have the age, and it's just you just have to. You need that micro oxygenation. I mean, look at all the crap whiskey that comes out in 4 months and 6 months from small barrels, right? You compare it to the stuff that was aged properly, right? That's not to say you can't speed it up a bit, but that's aged properly. It's nowhere close. You have people trying to game the system by pouring just bubbling straight oxygen into their stuff. You have people aging something and then just putting, they say it's a raspberry something or other, and they're pouring fresh raspberry juice into the thing to game the judges. I mean, I've sat numerous times on Polish meads that people say are Polish, and it's like, it's a faker mead, and a lot of these people are pouring these things for other people, non-Polish type people that are actually lived there or have been around it and tasted things for long enough. So it was about time that we wrote something. To kind of guard off against that. Because
is there a specific
go ahead.
process? Is there a specific process that's dictated with this style? Do you need to do this amount of aging? Should I have these?
Yeah.
Fruit off at times?
Right. So I mean, basically for the BJCP, we're going to talk about 3 more or less. We're talking about the Chujnik or Chujnik, which is the smallest one, right? Or for us, the smallest one, the Dwójniak and the Półtorak, that we're not really going to talk about at all, because that's the super huge, giant, sweet one that's fortified, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I mean, for the Chujnik, that's the one that's, I'll just read you the numbers right here. It basically starts at about, I mean, because here you're talking volumes for volumes, right? You're talking, the way it works is like, 1 part this and 2 parts this, 1 part, 1 part this, 3 parts this, right? So the way it basically works is there's the OG kind of can range because depending on what your honey actually is bricks wise. The ABVs are a much bigger range, and then your final gravity, that's kind of there's a little bit of range in that one too, but less so for the original gravity. There's no real number for these other than the final gravity really. You're talking for the little ones 9 months, a minimum of 9 months, and for the bigger ones 2 years. Traditionally they're in wine barrels, neutral wine barrels usually. Most of the time now you see them in stainless, but you're still talking these numerous years really change things. The fruit, anytime you add fruit to it, it takes the place of the honey. And in no means am I an expert in Polish meads. I'm not an expert in any means. I just do the best I can to learn as much as I can and pass that information on. There's always stuff that I have to learn, and there's always stuff I'll keep trying to learn. And if I'm wrong as Kristen, please, everybody, I want to learn. At the BJCP, we've reached out to a whole bunch of different people and had these conversations. I've had these conversations with them to specifically not be to kind of have a synopsis of the Polish meads in the way that we have kind of a synopsis of the Czech lagers, right? There's a lot more fiddly bits in between, but kind of to have the overall grasp of things. I mean, when we say you have to traditionally age, or when things are traditionally aged for 2 years, you better believe people aren't going to be aging these things for 2 years. I mean, I don't find somebody being a liar or a cheat if they age things less at all. That's not what I meant earlier. It's more along the lines of the people that keep dumping things all together, commercially available things together, and they just basically mix together a whole slop of something together and get it to taste what people think they taste like. I mean, it gets really, really frustrating when you're trying to teach people and they're like, "Have you had this?" And you're like, "That's not even close," right? I mean, the coolest thing about Polish meads, I mean, they can have pretty much anything, any sort of honey, any sort of fruit, any sort of spice, whatever. Like I said, you're going to talk about barrels that are neutral oak usually, because they age for usually so long. If you had it in a new oak barrel, it's going to be super, super, super oaky, and it's going to be really hard to drink. That's not to say you can't have a mix of them at all. I mean, stainless is super common. You're really not going to find any stuff aged in other spirit barrels. I mean, not traditionally. I've seen some really cool stuff, really cool newer age Polish stuff that's been aged in cool like whiskey barrels or whatever, or ex wine barrels. That's really cool. For the BJCP, it's going to be you're talking anything that's either non-oak wood or ex spirit stuff is going to end up being experimental mead, Polish into the experimental mead, which makes sense. Anything, so you have fortified versions of the dwójniak, and the półtorak is just straight out. I mean, that's not even being included because that's always fortified. But the versions of dwójniak, dwójniak. Sorry, my Polish is subpar. But also, it's okay if your Polish is subpar. Just give it a go. Try to pronounce in Polish. I mean, the Poles deserve. If we're gonna be making Polish mead and we're gonna be putting Polish mead in the guidelines, do your damnedest to try to at least pronounce it, even if you're like an asshole. I mean, it's the least we can do. Right, because we'll all look the same. Let's do our best, and then don't be offended when you get corrected, right?
So the hallmarks you'd say of these styles are the different aging times, strength, sweetness.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, basically, you're talking the amount of honey you're putting in these things, or the amount of fruit you're putting in these things, right? I mean, they're substantial, right? Let's say 1100 is the easiest number. Let's say 1100. You're starting at you're starting at for a dwójniak, you're talking 1150 or so. You're starting for a dwójniak, or sorry, dwójniak, you're starting at about 1100. A dwójniak, you're starting at about 1150 or so. And then the dwójniak, you're nearly 1300, man. I mean, it's huge, right? But then your FGs are way up there above almost a lot of starting gravities for even moderate sized meads. So you've got so much in there, right? So your honey's going to have to be top notch. A lot of the stuff in Poland is traditionally made with buckwheat. Their buckwheat is their buckwheat is not Eastern buckwheat. It's very, very much like the Western cultivated stuff. So it's way, way more chill on the crazy than the Eastern buckwheat is. I've seen an awful lot of stuff written about you can mimic these flavors by adding X, Y, and Z honeys together. I mean, I don't know. I truly don't believe that's a thing you need to do. I mean, the Poles can use a whole bunch of different honeys. They choose to use a lot of them choose to use the buckwheat because it's local and it's traditional, but they use a whole bunch of different stuff other too. So, you know, it's absolutely not required. So to try to clone something that you can't get, nor not just get, man, but a lot of people haven't even had it, right? Spend the money, get some Polish buckwheat. You can find it on the internet, super easy. We've got a grocery store here in St. Paul, Minneapolis rather, that you know, Kromorchuk, which is a sausage place that has Polish buckwheat honey. You know, whoever, go stop in there and get some, see if you like it. I mean, it's expensive, but of course it is. It comes in a little glass jar, but at least you'll be understanding more rather than trying to replicate stuff based on an internet comment.
You don't see this some percentage of buckwheat as being characteristic to the style. Like that's not going to be listed.
No, at all. Because I mean, this is based on numerous things. The basis of it is on the Polish written EU submitted to the EU definition of Polish meads, right? Just like is a thing, right? Polish meads are the thing. You can only call them Polish meads in the EU if they follow these definitions, right? So we start there, right? Because this is the Polish definitions of these things. And then we talk about tasting notes along the way, and then it's going to vary completely on you know what you're putting into it, the types of honey you're putting into it, the spices, the fruit, all that other stuff you're putting into it, right? So this is not something that's made up. This is all stuff based on the things the nation of Poland has put together for the EU, and then all of that was written. I wrote it in a much bigger format than sent it out to Polish people that I absolutely trust. To give it a look over, see, and then we had a lot of fantastic conversations along the way. I mean, one of the biggest ones is that we can't allow. I mean, we're not going to allow fortification of these. So the dwójnik, you have to. It's really hard to make a dwójnik and follow the numbers without fortification and hitting those numbers. It takes a lot. It takes a very good mead maker to do that. And we're talking, and back sweeting is allowed, I believe. I'll double check, but I think it is allowed. But I mean, a lot of these meads, you age these things for a long time. When you age these things this long, let's say you did in traditional wood, you're gonna lose. You know, 3 years, you're gonna lose a significant amount, because I would guess that a lot of people are gonna be using smaller barrels, not the big 55-gallon barrels. But you know, the most important part is to give people a definition to be able to base things off. Focus on the oxidation character, because I mean that's what we're talking about. You cannot have an oxidized honey character with a bright, fresh raspberry character. I mean that's what I mean about the people just trying to game the system for your own drinking pleasure. Do it. Do whatever you want to do. But when you come in and you want to be known as, and you start winning medals from people. It's just shady, man. It's just shady to me, especially with things like this, especially with things people haven't had before, right? That's where you usually see this stuff. You'll see it in specialty when people start claiming different wine grapes or different types of wine, especially ice wines and stuff, because the vast majority of people haven't had them. And then with people like myself and a few other, you know, mead judges, they'll have had numerous examples of them. They'll sit down and be like, somebody poured ice wine into this thing. I mean, that's exactly what it tastes like. Or somebody poured scotch into this thing, or somebody poured bourbon into this thing, right? It's like, and then when you're on the best of the show table, it's like you just get frustrated. I mean, what do? You reach out and you're like, hey, but it's one of those things. Knowing, judging as long as I've judged, it just gets exceedingly frustrating, and it goes against everything that, I mean, not just I believe in, but that I think that we all believe in, right? We're all trying to make this stuff from scratch, and it's not just a hodgepodge of. We're not making cocktails. I'm not making one mead. I mean, if I take 2 or 3 meads and blend them together that I personally made, that's freaking great, man. That's blending. That's an art form. If I take all this other stuff and I dump in all the stuff that's not allowed in the style, especially when it's commercially made, it just stinks, man. It's just bad for everybody. Then to go around and teach everybody this is the way it goes. Yeah. I mean, after all that negativity, there are some fantastic Polish mead makers out there. That people should look up. There's a few Polish books out there. A lot of it is old school type making the stuff. So not saying you can't translate and do your own thing with a lot more newer techniques to get it to where you need to get it and to take some age off, but you're never going to be able to replicate that age. I mean, and all the micro-oxygenating depth without doing them right. You know, these things are long-term projects, you know, and I'm seeing more and more and more of these win best of show things. And I wasn't sitting on the best of show panels for these, so I can't speak directly to it, but I can tell you, having sat on many best of show panels, it's crazy that, or even gold medal or even medal rounds on these very large competitions, it's crazy that all of a sudden, since people started making Polish meads, people started making other types of mead way less good, right? It just doesn't pass the smell test. And most of that is, and how do we fix that? Well, I mean, one, I may be completely wrong. It may be these are just absolutely amazing, dominating things. That may be. More likely is the fact that they're big and bad and nasty, and there's not a whole lot of education around yet for people to really understand. Because, I mean, there's numerous people. It's like, where can I get these online? And I'll show them. They're like, oh, I got to get them from Europe. That's really expensive shipping. I'm like, right? I mean, okay. I mean, the Wujniaks that you can get in the U.S., a lot of them are fortified, and they don't have to list it on there. So you're tasting it, you're like, oh yeah, this is, it's not the same thing. I mean, it's delicious. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love pouring booze and other things to make them more delicious. That's not a negative thing. It's just, if you're trying to learn, right? The Truniaks are really hard to find too, and the Chuniak, Jesus, I keep doing this. The Chuniaks, you rarely find at all, just because people in the U.S. are like, hey, why would I buy this 9% mead for $20 when I can buy this 18% mead for $20? It's an alcohol talks thing.
You have any specific brands you want people to look for when they're trying to get experience with these? I know Apis is one I've seen.
Not for this conversation. I don't.
Okay.
I don't want to push one brand and not another brand, because there are many places that you can see that you can find some really good stuff. And if you look on there's the Facebook Mead Makers group, and there's a few other ones that people have listed some of their ones that they really enjoy. So I would suggest just searching that out. I don't want to give anybody props on accident and forget somebody else. But there are some really good stuff. And frankly, get some friends together. Spend some money, and if you care enough, and get some of the really cool stuff over from Poland, because they're in the EU. It's not hard to get stuff shipped here. I mean, it's a little more expensive, but or have some friends, or make some friends of some Poles at numerous competitions. Like, listen, I really want to learn more. May I send you guys a whole bunch of stuff, and then kind of have like kind of a bottle exchange thing, right? It's like pen pals, except way better.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on the style, because it's one that I think and worry a lot about, because not only do I not have a lot of experience with it, but I'm sure a lot of other judges don't either. And so,
right,
how are we gonna give it a fair judging when we don't have a good baseline and there's not a specific guideline yet?
Right. I mean, the biggest thing that people miss is the oxidation. And in a good way, right? I mean, you've been in a barrel 3 years, or even in stainless 3 years, you're gonna have a lot of. It's gonna be very different than it's bright, right? If you have a mix of any instance at all, if you have an incident of aged something and fresh something, that doesn't jive, right? I mean, there's nothing that you can get, even when you're talking lambics that they blend fresh fruit into old lambics and then release them later. That fruit it's not so fresh, right? I mean, it's like Subway, not so fresh.
I'd like to switch gears for a minute and talk about flaws. I think I want to start with one that's a lightning rod.
Talk about which? Go ahead.
Flaws. So
flaws. Okay.
So,
I don't know much about flaws because I'm pretty perfect just the way I am, but I'll give it a go.
Nice. What's your take on raw honey as a flaw in a mead?
I didn't know that was a flaw.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So okay, let me guess. No talent ass clowns are like, listen, let's say you back sweeten with something specifically because I really want that beautiful bright character or whatever, and they're like, wow, this smells like a raw honey character. And I would also assume these are the same people that bitch that there's no varietal honey character when you enter that same dry hydromel, correct?
Probably. I think when I heard a lot about this years ago, and thinking about it now since then, I think for me, when people have said, oh, this has raw honey, and I've tasted what they're tasting, to me it seems like that tallow note that you're referring to.
Yeah, shitty honey, right? I mean, poorly. There's been a few like really cool honeys that I've got in my possession lately that smell absolutely fantastic, and the wheels fall off, and they're exceedingly over processed, right? As somebody that has honey, you know, it's like if I harvest this honey when it's super hot out, we're gonna have more wax in there than we should. Excuse me. If I heat the crap out of this stuff, we're gonna have more wax in it than we should, right? Then you're talking a quality of honey thing, right? I mean, do they mean raw honey like when you get the honeycombs and you eat them like? Because raw honey doesn't. I mean, all honey's raw. It hasn't been cooked. Is it not? I mean, am I missing something?
No, I'm not sure. I just know that it's a controversial comment that shows up on score sheet.
Is it?
Yeah.
Really? If I've written that, you feel free to yell at me and I'll buy you a cocktail next time I see you, because that sounds like some dumb shit to write. Raw honey. I mean, I don't get it. Like raw hops. This tastes like raw hops. So like, yeah. Just to be clear, Doug, they are raw because that's the way it goes, right? I mean, I don't know. It sounds like a reach. It sounds like coming up with your own descriptor and not coming up with your new descriptor and not describing it, right?
Yeah,
by raw honey, I mean wax in the honey. I mean tallowy honey. Oh, so you could have said tallowy honey.
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, I think you're right. That's the only thing I can possibly think of, right? Honey but then again, it wouldn't be raw because it would have been heated, and then there goes the rawness, right? Because you're in my raw diet. That's why we're so thin. Raw meat, raw honey, raw carrots.
I only eat the rawest mead.
only the rawest. Somebody's gonna steal that. Somebody's gonna steal that name. The rawest.
Are there any other like regular flaws that do show up in meads that you don't think are very well understood that you want to touch on? Because obviously they're different from flaws that are going to show up in beer. Like
yeah. On a whole, I would say in the last 10 years, not 5 years, the capacity to ferment things. Yeah, actually I do. Now that you bring it up, that's a great question. Yes, but no to your question. Way too many nutrients that I can still taste them in the end, like the fruit Flintstone things. That's a huge thing to me. I find a lot, even more. Fermentation tannins, way overly fermentation tannin-y. Way, where you can completely taste them in the end. Especially in traditionals. I mean, those two, and fermenting the crap out of your honey by using too much yeast and or not controlling the temperature. I'm not talking flaws. It's not a flaw as in it's going to kick anything weird out, but a flaw is in you've scrubbed all the flavor out. You fermented the yeast way too hot, or you just used way too much yeast, or you put so much nutrient in it, the thing just took off and just completely fermented like crazy, right? There's a happy medium between the thing taking 6 weeks and the thing taking 3 days, right? I did an experiment ages ago saying, listen, yeah, you can do these staggered nutrient additions every 9 hours. Yeah, you can do them every 24 hours, or you can do them, like commercial mead or winemakers do, like do it at pitch and then like a drop of two or three Play-Doh, 2 or 3 bricks, and add it again. And to me, I found that to be one, it's way easier to do to add them in those 2 additions, or rather than adding a whole bunch of them, right? It's one of those Dunning-Kruger things, right? A little bit of knowledge makes somebody an expert. And they're saying, listen, I tried it this way, so this is the only way to do it. And I mean, that's just crap. That's just crap all around, saying there's only one way to do it. I mean, back to the Polish things we were talking about, they're old school the way they do most of their stuff, and frankly, their stuff is ridiculously delicious. But you can do the same thing. You can change that Polish style up and do it the new way, and still have delicious things too. So again, I think overly nutrienting, overly fermentation tannining, and just fermenting the crap out of it. I mean, you'll still get stuff that's most of the bad stuff I have now is just from poor process. Things weren't taken care of. Oxidation. You didn't add what you're supposed. You didn't add your sulfates. You didn't add your sorbate when you should have. It keeps fermenting. Things like that. Those are just kind of generic things. I don't see those that much. Poor ingredient quality. I see a lot. Just probably more often than not. But when you're talking the separation between the really good, and the really great stuff, it's the nutrient stuff, the fermentation tannins, and it's always the balance of, and then again, it's always the balance of tannin and acid and such. And but then again, that's I find that more to be an individual case. Like a person will not be able to get their tannin acid balance right, rather than a lot of people, right? So you'll see some people that have a house flavor of not agreeing that there's oxidation there and arguing with you until 4 a.m. in the basement in a green basement that you don't remember, or they don't remember, over and over again because they have oxidation, they won't admit it, right? Very specific example, but things like that, having an own personal house flavor because you have there's something in your taste that you're not getting, which also isn't very good to give it out to other people and saying, hey, if you have 5 people saying, hey, this is oxidized, man, what are you doing? It's like, oh, well, you never use metabisulfate. And you're like, okay, we should probably start there, and continue on. But those are the really big ones I see, because you have a lot of people, there's a lot of recipes out there from a lot of really good mead makers, and people just blindly follow them without really understanding what's behind them.
On one of those, I want to ask just a quick follow-up. You mentioned the fermentation tannins, too much of that. So are you able, when you're tasting that, are you able to distinguish that this is a fermentation tannin or a specific?
Yeah.
Or is it just that it's too tannic?
No, fermentation tannins. By fermentation tannins, I'm not saying too tannic. I'm saying the texture, the feeling they give, right? Especially in pale meads, right? There's numerous fermentation tannins that you'll use, or fermentation additives that you'll use to change the texture of the mead, right? So anytime you're using any sort of fermentation tannin, just mix yourself up some water and just add them to water in varying amounts and taste them. Just, I mean, even the red ones too. That way you can see what they're like, what they taste like without anything else added to them, right? You can easily just boil some water, add it to it, let it cool down, mix it up, and try it at the grams per liter you would be adding. That way you understand what it is, and then the too much, because people are like, okay, well, a little more, I'll add, a little is good, a lot is better. And frankly, a lot of the time it's people don't have decent scales, because if you're making a gallon of something, you need very, very little of that stuff. And if your scale is plus or minus 5 grams, you're gonna have an issue.
Oh, I was gonna switch gears. I want to talk about oak for a second, since oak is allowable in all styles.
Yep.
I mean, as a judge, what should you be looking for, and when is it too much?
It's almost mandatory that you need them, because if you don't have it, you're missing that texture and that tannin. Even in wine, you use certain types of wood for certain things. I mean, certain toasts. Same in booze. It's usually a good rule of thumb to kind of follow. If you can match up your mead that you're making more or less with a type of wine, and see how they use the oak and what they use, because a lot of some of the big red wines you can use oak from anywhere, and it's just how you do things. Other times, like you're making a white wine or something like that. You're like, do I really want to use oak? Does this ever see oak at all? And if it doesn't see oak at all, I'm going to need to find my tannins from somewhere else than oak. I mean, I think that's a really simple rule of thumb for people to use. And for judging, the same thing. I mean, if you're judging, let's say, a Sauvignon Blanc Piment, and you have oak screaming through, it doesn't matter if oak is traditional or not in a Sauvignon Blanc. It's not usually, but does it play well? And is it imparting itself too much? Because you can't say what's too much until you tried it, right? I mean, you really don't want something imparting, big tannic and vanilla character, or vanillin character to things, if it doesn't, right? So to me specifically, if I brought again that Sauvignon Blanc example, and it tastes like you've added vanilla to it, I mean, that's almost it kind of gets in the way of the entire concept. It's not to say I'm going to take points off of it. It's just, would this be better with less or more? And frankly, when you get to a point where you have that much vanilla in something, you're going to have a lot more tannins with it too, right? It's not, you don't get one without the other when it comes to the oak and the different types of oak. I think, it's a very trained hand to be able to pick and choose which oak you use, when you use it, and how much you use it. As a judge, it's way easier to sit back and be like, I wasn't expecting that oak, right? Because if you had just a traditional, let's say just a wildflower, something dead simple to think about, would that add a little character to it? Fermenting, and then not just the oak, fermenting on the oak. What yeast would you use to do that? And just adding more depth of character for that especially traditional, like we were talking this, it's like if still or sparkling, or sorry, still or petulant, or I guess even sparkling, what makes the most sense here? Because if it's going to be sparkling, it's going to make those tannins feel a lot grippier than they normally would be. But there's no really set answer that I have other than how does it play. I mean, the gentle hand is a better hand when it comes to oak, just in my personal experience, just making meads. Would you not say, Josh? I mean, have you ever had one like, listen, wow, that oak was huge. That oak completely made this thing. Or has it been more along the lines of like, this oak was maybe a little much, or this could have used a little bit more oak, and maybe if not even oak, just a little more tannins. What have you found?
I found it's really style dependent, like something really big, strong, rich dessert style.
Josh, did you die?
Fake Polish, like you're complaining about. Knowing the story behind the curtain, I see how much of a role
Joshua,
playing
are you dead?
On ones like that. Some people often, when they get their score sheets back from competitions, complain that it looks like there's completely contradictory comments on these score sheets. This one says it was too much of this. This one says it was too little of the same character. So there's a real mismatch. So what should a good discussion look like from judges when they've finished filling out their score sheets and they're comparing notes? What should the expectation be?
Let's talk about reality first rather than expectations, right? Because you're asking the wrong question. It's not the discussion is not the expectation. It's the score sheet that's the expectation, right? Because usually what happens is you'll have two judges writing two completely separate things, and then when they chat, none of that what they wrote changes. They'll just move the score around, right? You've judged enough and entered enough competitions to see that. So it's to be expected that when things progress that way, whereas you judge and then chat, that there are going to be differences on the score sheet. Most of the differences I see are along the lines of sweetness, dryness, and such, carbonation and such, the things we talked about before. Some will say, I prefer, more cherry. I prefer less cherry. I prefer, more oak. I prefer less oak. When I say prefer, personally, I don't mean this is required for the style. I mean, I would prefer this to have more of this, and I think this would do better. That's not necessarily taking points away. It's just because I mean, you can say, this needs more cherry complexity, right? Because sometimes you'll have cherries that are just Robitussin, and you're like, listen, if you want this to be really great, you're going to need to blend this up with something else, because in their defense, usually a lot of the time it's like, these are the trees in my backyard. I do this once a year, and this is what I have. And then they enter it, and that's absolutely fine, but it doesn't make it fantastic, right? I mean, it takes a lot of great stuff going all around to make something fantastic. For the entrant, what they should be expecting is thorough score sheets. I didn't say full, I said thorough score sheets that discuss all of the things you and I talked about earlier about that were very important. Sure, they can talk about the carbonation. Sure, they say, hey, this was still, you said it was petulant, just letting you know. That's also a great indication. Frankly, I don't know why an entrant would enter something that, like, they would not like I'm trying this. This is still. I tried to make it petulant. It's not petulant, so I entered as still. I've never met one trying to, say the otherwise. But entrants should expect they should expect feedback in the sense that it's been fully discussed, and I'm talking about the style to you, and I'm talking about any errors there to you. But I don't have to. I'm very, very much against active fixes for things that I don't know. Right? Let's say it's super alcoholic. Right. Well, I mean, you could have fermented it really hot, or you could have fermented it really fast, or you could have used a different yeast and it got away from you, or too much nutrient. I don't know, but I will tell you that, like, this is really hot and solventy. Okay, that means it's your job to know why it's hot and solventy. So you need to look at your process to tell yourself, because the last thing you want is to have a whole bunch of judges sitting there telling you what you did wrong, and you're like, I didn't do any of those. That's not helpful at all. And you've got 3/4 of your score sheet filled up by talking about the carbonation level, and the other part talking about things you never did, right? So focusing on what's in the glass, focusing on how it balances together, talking about all of the aspects you possibly can of it, and then some commentary on on where you think this would, let's say it fits perfectly. Maybe it doesn't. Then you say, I think this would do better here. It's easy when they're in the wrong category, because you're like, listen, this is in the wrong category. It needs to be here. Which I try to take away from my judges, and try to fix that at the beginning if I can. If I'm going to be judging the mead, then I have somebody else kind of give it a look over than me. But you will have a lot of mismatch, especially when differing levels of judges and judge quality. I mean, there can be some absolutely noob judges that are fantastic wine drinkers or booze drinkers or beer drinkers that write you really good comments on the character and the quality, and then you'll have some really experienced people that even if they are Mead certified, they may talk nothing about what's in the glass, like we talked about. I mean, it's a big issue. So they should be really looking at how their feedback matches what's in their glass, because everybody that enters beer Mead should be sitting down with their score sheets afterwards and trying them along with what's written down. And you don't have to agree with everything, but try to learn something along the way. I mean, if you're there just to win medals and you didn't win a medal, throw the stuff away, because you're not there to get feedback and stuff. But if you are, then give it a look.
I see a lot of people talk about, I enter competitions to get feedback, and it seems like competitions are almost splitting, where some competitions are really focused on that and some are just, hey, we're picking the best.
That's fine. To me, that's fantastic. I absolutely love both models are perfect for what they are in different applications. You can't apply we need to give people feedback this thing for like let's say, to me, it's like the Mazer, right? I'm not entering the damn Mazer Cup for your feedback. I'm into the Mason Cup to kick your ass and take as many medals as I can. There's plenty of, it's not cheap. There's plenty of other, local places and smaller things. National Homebrew Con. I'm not interested in it. I don't need $50 of your feedback. What I need is a medal, right? Those are the perfect times to have, to not worry so much about the feedback. You've perfected what you want to perfect, and away you go. The other competitions, yeah, absolutely, man. Feedback has to be number one. And again, I'm not talking about telling me how to fix this. I'm talking a full description, a full discussion of this, with maybe some points along the way about things to look for in this. Is too sharp, it's too strong, it's too this. It needs to have a brighter, like a yeast-derived character, better honey, like we all talked about. I think they're equally good for different reasons, and the entrant needs to know that. You need to know this coming in. And all the competitions I do, I ensure people know this is what we're doing. You're entering this competition for this reason. This is we really focus on feedback here, but over here we really focus on winning. That's not so much saying that you can't have good feedback along the way. It's just going to be way less and way more pointed. And as an entrant, you should know that. By me, the competition organizer, ensuring you know that. I mean, if you don't read stuff, there's nothing I can do to help you. And there's plenty of people that get all upset about that for certain competitions. But and then it's my job as the organizer to ensure that the people that are giving the feedback are doing a good job, and we're doing the best we can. The vast majority of the time, to be honest, it's a feedback loop, right? You need to tell me. I can't go through every single judge and read their stuff. If there's problem judges, I absolutely 100% personally go through their stuff, and say, listen, especially the high ranking ones, and then the high ranking judges get bumped down to tables where they do less damage. Any good competition organizer will do that. You have judges that have sharp elbows that like to pick fights, and they don't get to judge. It's very simple. And I don't mean fist fights. I mean, they're just dicks. You don't get to do that. You don't get to come into a place where everybody's having a great time and you're the asshole just because you are, and everybody accepted that. No, man, we don't have time for that at all. And I have to ensure that everybody else is there to have a good time. They're giving feedback as good as they can. And if they're not given feedback where I feel it should be as a competition organizer, we'll make the changes we can. But it's really hard. And I apologize to anybody that's ever got score sheets back from a competition that I've run that haven't been great. But I can't check them all specifically. And if they're not great, you need to let me know, because if you let me know, then I have a blacklist of judges that, 1, aren't allowed to judge, 2, can't judge together, 3, they don't get to judge these styles, and it's all by name. And it's funny that the ones that are trouble has a tendency to be trouble across the board, right? And the only way we can get better is if we all get better. If you as an entrant, you're like, listen, I wasn't happy with this, fine, man, send me a picture, let's have this conversation. What do you think? Like, okay, great. If something got completely boned, and it was just blank. I'm going to apologize to you. I'm going to refund your money, right? If it's just absolute crap along the way. If you entered the wrong bottle in the wrong category and you're adamant about like there's no way, we'll double check. We'll do what we can do as an organizer. But the most important part is that there's not one competition I've ever ran that's about me. It's all about the entrant, and it's all about the judges. The judges having a good time in a place that they can learn and feel like they can have a good time and smile. The last thing you want is somebody sitting there shushing you from across the room because it's not an environment they can learn in. You're like, listen, man, you're sitting in a freaking brewery and there's things going all around you. I apologize. I didn't put you in the perfect spot for you to be able to learn, but everybody else is giggling and laughing and having a good time. And, lunch times and everybody gets out of hand. Yeah, everybody needs to shut the hell up, right? Because there's still people judging. Also, judge faster. I mean, that's a big thing I push. Judge faster. Stop chatting so much. Let's go.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective as a competition organizer, because these are good things for people to hear. So when we're talking about this split between good feedback versus rewarding the best, you think a lot of this is on the organizer to communicate this is what we're all about? And
has to be, right?
Yeah.
Has to be, right? If I'm leasing you or selling you this car, you sure as shit need to know which is which.
Yeah. Right.
You give me $3,000. I think I bought this car. You're like, no, you owe me $600 a month. You're like, ooh, hang on. Right? I mean, that's all on me. This is not that transaction. This transaction is like, I need to be as upfront to you as I can. I'm going to give you all the information out there. You may not like it. That's fine. If I change the format of the score sheets, I frankly don't care about your opinion on the format of the score sheets. As long as I'm giving you all the feedback that you should be getting, or and the other side, giving you the best chance you can to win. I mean, they can be similar, but they're usually two separate things, right? I mean, the best chance to win is that you get the best people you can, sit down, get all those out around you, and then you pick right now. This is what we pick. And then ensuring that for the most feedback is ensuring that judges aren't overworked. I mean, there's nothing more annoying as an entrant. Well, entrants usually don't see, but as a judge and an organizer / judge, to sit back, go to a competition, and they're like, yeah, these are your 15 IPAs. And I'm like, I'm sorry? I have 15 IPAs. They're like, yeah, but you judge fast. I'm like, there ain't no damn reason I'm doing 15 IPAs. You're out of your mind. I'm like, no, some are double though. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. No, man, your poor planning and your poor ability to wrangle judges and your poor ability to sort this whole thing out should not be put on me, because if it's going to be put on me, that's going to flow downhill. That's going to flow downhill to the entrance. Because I will say flat out, it's like, if you give me the 15 of these things to do, I won't walk. I will have a conversation in the hallway directly with you. Like, what the hell are you doing, man? I mean, I have 15, you have 12. The next session, we got barley wines and the meads. And hey, can we stay for the 5th session? No, you got to keep these. You got to organize in a way that you keep these things small. If you don't have an area that's able to pull enough judges directly from your area, and you're expecting other people to travel far and wide, you better trim those entries. You better cut those entries short, because if you're sitting on 500 entries and you got 20 judges, and then all of a sudden you tell the entrant, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to be doing next weekend, the weekend after, and the third weekend. Why is anybody going to want to enter your competition again? Just do the size you can and do it well. I mean, every competition we do here is not for profit. Every dollar we've ever got in that didn't cover our expenses get donated, right? So that I want to get it's not that I want to get as many entries as I can. I want to get as many entries as we can handle, so I can give as much money away. But I'm not going to be overextending this. I'm not going to be making these judges, do 3 sessions, 4 sessions of 15 beers each, these giant beers, these giant meads, stretched over numerous weekends. No, man, that's completely 100% on the organizer. And then it's about talking with other mead makers and talking with other organizers that you may know and say, hey, what do you think of this competition? Because usually everybody wants to get in on the thing. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to organize stuff. You're like, yeah. You're like, I had an organizer that was absolute trash person. I mean, actual trash person, trash judge, and a trash organizer. The dude's like, yeah, Kristen, I told you, fuck you, buddy. I told you I could do it. I said, no, man, no, I didn't say you couldn't do it. I said you couldn't do it well. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, are you kidding me? I judged. I think it was 50 beers that were big beers in a day. And they were like, make sure you fill your score sheets completely. And I was like, let's just say people judge as fast as I do. And I had to get through those. I mean, you're talking a significant portion of my day. that I'm judging these things, and then the amount of alcohol, and then the amount of pallet fatigue, and the amount of like, man, I do my best at our competitions to make sure when you come up here, you're fed well, you have a good time. We got some stuff. You got people you can hang out with. You're getting maybe six, seven, maybe 8 entries to judge. And then we move on, because the most important part for an entrant is that you get someone's palate, and not just palate, but your focus, right? You're going to lose focus. You're sitting on, number 10, number 11, like, when will this ever end? And that's never good. You keep judges happy, you keep entrants happy. I mean, everything being equal, they're doing their best to fill out good score sheets and doing well. But when there's so many new competitions or even older competitions, I mean, especially older competitions, that have always done a crap job. I'm like, oh no, but we do it every year, and people enter and people complain, and it's a local one, so people rather continue to enter their local one who's treated them poorly for years and years, because they don't want to send things out of state. And I get it. It's expensive. It's expensive to ship things, but it comes to a point, good money after bad, where you're like, maybe. And there are an awful lot of people that travel. So we have pickups at numerous competitions around here. It's like, hey, there's going to be 4 or 5 different competitions that have boxes up here. So if you want to enter down there, there's going to somebody be driving back there. There's going to be 7 driving over there. So you just put your entry there, and it's free shipping. It's just, again, that competition, that other competition, letting everyone else know that, yeah, if you have stuff to drop off, come in, let's say the mash out, yeah, you can absolutely drop it off. No problem. But then again, it's all about communication for the organizers.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of nice ethical things from an organizer's perspective. I know that you touched on some from an entrant or a judge perspective. Is there any other ethical things you want to touch on when it comes to entering or judging?
Yeah, I mean, entry, just as we talked about before, don't be that person that tries to cheat their way to do stuff. I mean, the most important part to me ever has just been making good beer so I can share it with my friends. If I happen to get a medal, and I did a decent job when I was, it wasn't about the medal. I mean, truly it was about the medal, so I could beat the shit out of my friends and walk around with 2 medals on my ears telling me I can't hear you because I'm a winner. But then it didn't go my way sometimes, and then I could hear them because they're a winner, but I still, it's all about having fun. So make sure you're entering for the right reasons. Enter to get medals, great. Enter to get medals, man. Take as best you can do. Enter for feedback, get better. I mean, I would tell you right now, you should not be entering a single competition ever until you feel confident in yourself. Join a club, have conversations with people, drink beers with people. That's the most important part, right? The camaraderie. You enter competitions, kind of. It really is a pissing contest. If you're entering competitions specifically for feedback, we need to talk about where to get you more feedback for free, because that's what these brew club meetings are. I mean, the St. Paul Homebrewers became so good because most of us were dickheads, and all of us hated to lose against each other, and we kept pushing each other to get better and better and better until we took a couple national titles. I mean, that's the way. And I'm not saying that anybody has to be that crazy and go that far, but when you're talking about, you should want to push yourself to get better and better and better. I mean, same thing for cooking and whatever. Like, yeah, sure, you can cook white rice this way, but if you cook it like this, it's going to be better. I'm like, wow, learning something for the same amount of time, you might as well put up fantastic stuff. As a judge, same, man. Just look to have a good time. Look to have some fun. Don't get drunk and be a dickhead. Seriously, God, there's nothing more frustrating than going to an after party and someone gets all grabby. Someone gets all grabby or slappy or fighty. It's like, we ain't got time for that. We're all out there having fun. When you're judging, sit down. Let's do your job. Dig your ditch. Let's have a good time. Giggle along the way. Let's try to learn something. Try to teach if there are stewards or people that don't have much experience as a higher ranking judge or someone with more experience, especially in the Meads, chat to your stewards if you have them. Would you like to try this? Please feel free to try all of these. As the head judge or lead judge, if you have the opportunity to do that, if there's something weird that you taste along the way that doesn't do well, and it's not going to go to many best show, talk to your steward or talk to the organizer beforehand. And like, listen, I'm wondering if I tell my steward, can I tell him to pull, the second one of this and just put a note on it and be like, this has got this character that I keep talking about that people ask me, like tallow. What's tallow? Is like, hey, this traditional I got here is super, super tallowy. It's not going to do anything. Put it aside. Then at lunch, or after the competition's over or whatever, it's blind, so it doesn't matter. We'll try it. And then people are like, oh, tallowy. They don't mean Or it's like you said, Josh, it's like raw honey. What the hell is raw honey? Well, I guarantee people would say this sweet thing with tallow. They're like, oh, okay. And then you can explain this is not raw honey. This is what crappy honey tastes like, right? You shouldn't be doing that. And any chance along the way you have just to, to be helpful and learn and do your best just to learn every single day. When you're sitting down judging, trying to learn something from everybody, even the most pompous clown. Not talking about me right now. Different type of pompous. Even the most pompous clown. You can learn something from them at some point. You got to dig through a lot of stuff sometimes, but do your best to learn from everybody. Even if it's nothing more than not gonna hang out with that dude. That's also, that's just a good life lesson. You're welcome.
Awesome. I think we should take a little break and then drink some mead. What do you think?
Yeah, good.
All right, Kris, what are we drinking?
Chaucer's Mead. For sure. It's just from the bottle. It says it's a gold medal, California State Fair. Most importantly, it's gluten-free. And it says delicious wine, so I need to trust that. That's delicious wine. I always enjoy reading these labels. I would tell you it's like a throwback to like a 70s bottle that you see covered in dust at some rando liquor store. But the reason I chose this, you told me I could choose whatever I wanted to choose, and I wanted to choose this one specifically because it has the most reach, right? There's very few meads at this price point that you can find more or less not just across the U.S. but many other different places. And I think it's really important that when you're talking about, taste alongs that specifically that you want to taste something that most people can taste, but also at the same time you need to be able to taste something that is good, but maybe not fantastic or not like earth shattering. And Chaucer's, I would say it's sweet. That's a sweet mead. It's on the high end of semi-sweet, if not so. It lacks most of any sort of balance. It's got a little bit of acid to it, but almost really no tannins to it. Maybe a little vanilla thing going on. It's almost like a piment the way it comes across. The way the esters come across, apples and pears, maybe some apricots going on, and it's got that kind of racy grape character to it. They got a whole thing on the back about wow, many ancient cultures. You don't have to drink this out of some sort of horn. I would feel better if you didn't. Frankly, you can drink it out of a shoe or just right out of the bottle. The numerous times that we've mixed, this is good. It's good for sweetening up cocktails and stuff. It's a really, really solid base mead that people talk a lot of shit about for no reason. Frankly, people talk a lot of shit about many things for most reason. I don't know why. Yeah, it's probably too sweet, just for what it is, and could use a little more complexity and balance. But man, if I'm getting somebody into mead that doesn't know about mead, especially at this price point, there are many more delicious, cool, unique variants from all these wonderful craft mead makers around. But if I'm getting somebody into mead, you'd be hard pressed to find something better and more focused than Chaucer's, because you can talk about the ester profile, right? Like we just did, the fruit character, right? You can talk about the honey. To me, it's got just kind of a generic wildflowery character to it. I don't know where they get their honey from. I specifically didn't look because I didn't want to have that information as we were trying this. If people want to look and see if it's written, it's usually probably not, I would assume. But it's one of those things where it's like you can really do anything with this mead. This mead would be a great base to put anything in. People would give this mead 20 in this area. 27, 28. They'd say it's boring. They say blah, blah, blah. This is a solid mid 30s to high 30s. Absolutely. It is just super easy to drink. It's solidly made. It's lacking some balance, but other than that, what do you think, Josh, when you try this thing? Because I love serving this blind to people and then have them going, what is that?
I love that you chose this, because you're right. It's probably the most widely available mead, and I don't think I've ever had it. So. And
people just sit there and bitch about it, like, all they got is Chaucer's. Yeah, I will absolutely hands down support quality mead from small little craft places well before I would buy Chaucer's. But it's one of those things. It's like when people say Guinness isn't tapping in every Irish place. And it's like, well, how often have you had Guinness? You do know it's a world class thing that you're able to access pretty much anywhere in the world. You're just like, well, it's boring. Oh, I have Guinness on tap in the basement right now. I have Guinness on tap all year round. Guinness is an absolute fantastic beer. It's 4%. It's fantastic, ridiculous. I mean, it's so good, can go on anything. I mean, this Chaucer's Mead isn't as good as that. Respectively, but it's one of those things that if you really care about the industry of mead, if you really, really care about getting people involved and understanding more things about mead, this is a fantastic one to take to them. And you can freaking find it. And you don't need 17 people telling you, yeah, this place was great, it's local, the mead isn't so great, however, you should buy their stuff local. Or this is absolutely fantastic. However, to get people involved in mead, a lot of mead price point is really high when you're talking. So they can go down and get a, $8, less than that, $5 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc or Vino Verde from Trader Joe's that does the point for going to some sort of party. That's not for these people. This is for people that want to just reach out a little bit and just get them hooked on mead. Same thing for bourbon. There's some fantastic bourbons that are $10 to $15 that people are like, I don't like bourbon. You're like, you just cool your jets there, hotshot. We'll find you something that'll get you hooked on the thing. Same thing for Scotch. I'm not a big Scotch fan. There's always some best buys that you can get, best budget things to get people hooked, to get people in. Because once they have this, you're like, oh, this is really nice. I think it really is. And you're like, cool. Now, how about you try, X, Y, and Z, and you move up to the fruit ones. What do you think? What do you think about this? You think about the same thing? It's missing some acids, definitely missing tannins, a little bit sweet.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I get some acidity, like no tannin.
Yep. Booze for sure.
Surprisingly decent honey character, mostly the pollen.
Yes.
That you're talking about.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't have raw honey character.
No, it doesn't.
nor is it tallowy or.
No, I'm impressed. Like I said, I've never had it before. It's pretty nice. So,
yeah, I mean,
mine came
there's
with
nothing.
I don't know if yours came with a spice packet.
Your came with what?
Spice packet.
What?
Yeah.
You dropped it off. You stole my spice packet.
Yeah, I ripped you off. 2 for me.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm not sure whatever size spice packet it is. I'm pretty sure you're not going to use all of it.
I think there's 2 of them.
Yeah, there should be 1 spice packet.
No, they're stapled together.
Or did you staple them together?
No, I didn't.
You stole my sachet of spice. That's
it.
fine. I think the wife's got some shitty tea bags I can use.
Yeah,
but yeah, this is.
That's
go ahead.
People have knocked it a lot in the past. They're like, oh yeah, they send spices with it because you need to spice it for it to be drinkable. Blah blah blah. But nice.
Yeah, I mean, anytime I travel and give beer exams, I will always, wherever I'm traveling, I will pick the local light lager, whether I'm in Chile or whether I'm in Colombia or wherever. I'll pick the light lager that everybody talks the most shit about, and I'll stick it on that beer exam. And I shit you not, people are like, "Oh, that was really good. What was that?" And you show them, and they're like, "No way, no way." I'm like, "Yeah, man. Stop being so damn biased. Try stuff. It's okay to be. Large places can make great stuff. Small places can make great stuff, and vice versa, right? That's what I'm talking about. Bias. Give it a go. Right? It's way harder, and then you have monetary biases. Monetary bias when it comes to things people consume. You'll watch people search high and low for certain beers that they can't find. They'll get them. They're absolutely tubs of crap, but they spent $35 on this crowler. You damn well know that they're going to want to believe it's delicious. Same for whiskey, and same for mead. That's not saying really expensive stuff can't be great, but when you chase those price points and they get really high, the expectation becomes almost impossible, right? Somebody's like, I'm going to spend this much on something, and all of a sudden, if it doesn't just blow their doors off, they crap all over it. Or even if it's bad, they'll say, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, I got to travel all over to get this. Don't buy it. Don't apply how hard it was to get something. By the deliciousness. At the same time, don't ruin a fantastic occasion pumping up a beer, mead, or wine more than it is. There's numerous times I've been traveling around the world where at the time I'm like, man, this beer is so delicious. This is the most delicious beer I'll have. And it has nothing to do with the beer or the wine or whatever. It's the location, all the people are hanging out with, and then I'll bring it back. I'm like, wow, this is really bad. This is really bad. Or at the same time, it's like you could be in a really bad mood and you're like, man, this is terrible. You try it later, like, man, I was so wrong. This is so delicious. What the hell is wrong with me? I must have been hanging out with Fletty. It was all salty and sad, and then just like, don't think Denny's good anymore.
It sounds like this mead should or will be coming to a mead tasting exam.
Don't look at me. I can't make you promises or not promises. It's just one of those things, it's so ubiquitously found that people just pass it over.
Yeah.
And truth be told, I mean, this label is lame as hell, man. I like the screw top. I appreciate the screw top bottle completely, but this label's lame as hell, man. I mean, you got, I don't even know who, Arthur and Gwendolyn. What was her name? I don't remember. Carrying the I would say Goblet of Fire, but I'm pretty sure that's a chalice. And some Carcassonne looking thing in the background. Come on, man. Do better. Change up that label, spice it up a little bit, and people just buy the crap out of it. It's solid.
You're going to subtract about 5 points for bad label?
Yes, and I expected it to be fizzy, and it wasn't, so that's another 5 points. They didn't say it was or it wasn't. I just expected it to be. Another 5 points. They did put delicious, though. And it's 100% pure honey. And gluten-free. But being from California, the gluten-free should be a lot larger. This is very small gluten-free.
Yeah, I mean, I know you say you didn't look where the honey's come from. It says that it's local California, I assume wildflower.
Yeah, which means there may be a bunch of citrus in it, which would explain the citrusy, but maybe not. I mean, there's a whole bunch. I mean, it's a really nice honey character, decent amount of acid, lacks tannins, and just seriously, I mean, there's been so many more worse meads that I've had in my life that were commercially made than this, and I also wouldn't say this is boring. I wouldn't say this is a boring mead at all. I mean, it's pretty solid.
33, thanks for
No, pound your 33. Nope, I'm going 36 and a half, 37 and a half, 37 and a half. Also, I hate freaking half points. Are you kidding me? Just choose.
Quarter points.
I approve quarter points. That's fine.
Any other final comments on this?
No, man, I don't think so. I think you and I both talked about everything. I think it's nice little florally, fruity jobber that's easy to drink and really easy to get people involved in mead, especially if they don't know anything about it. I mean, it's pretty solid.
Nice. All right. Well, I guess thanks for your time and thanks for jumping in on this.
What the fuck am I supposed to do with this one?
If you want to crack it, feel free, but I don't have one of those. That was just
wait.
For you. That was special privilege.
What? Yeah. Hang on, my special privilege is raspberry mead. Listen, I did this to teach people, not for my gift. Listen,
no, go ahead and crack it.
I'll send you a list. Nope, not gonna do it. I'll just send you a list of approved bourbons that you may get me at some point.
Oh, nice. No,
I said at some point.
I forgot to buy 2 bottles, and I couldn't find it the next time I went to buy it. So,
oh,
you got the one.
Well, you could have dropped off a bottle of bourbon for me, and you could have kept the one. I could have watched you drink it.
Yeah, that would have been fair.
Yeah, man. Anything else right now?
No, I think we're good.